The palace was silent, too silent for a place so drenched in gold. Marble columns loomed like ancient ghosts, and the air smelled of incense, honey, and fear. Inside a dim-lit chamber, a young girl stood before her father, draped in royal silk that felt more like chains. She was not yet 20, he was the king of Egypt, and what he whispered next would twist her fate forever. Marry me. The words curdled in her ears like poison. Her name was Arsinoe, and she had been raised to think of herself as divine, half goddess, half mortal. But tonight, divinity became a prison. She could not scream, she could not run, she could only bow and agree. This was not love, this was politics carved into flesh. The incestuous marriages of the Ptolemies were meant to keep power pure, but for Arsinoe too, they would become a curse that consumed her mind, her body, and every soul she ever loved. Her father made her his bride, her brother made her his queen, and history remembers her not as a victim, but as a goddess. But if you peel back the gold and the marble, you find something darker, something they tried to erase. If you enjoy hidden truths like this, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because this is the story Egypt didn't want you to hear, and once you enter, there's no turning back. To understand the nightmare of Arsinoe too, you must first step into her world, a world built on the bones of empires. It is 316 BCE. Alexander the Great is dead, and his colossal empire has shattered like a vase dropped from Olympus. His generals, the Diadochi, are carving it into kingdoms with swords still dripping from war. Egypt, rich and ancient, falls to one man, Ptolemy the Soter. A shrewd Macedonian general, he takes the title pharaoh and begins the Ptolemaic dynasty, blending Greek ambition with Egyptian god kingship. He claims divine ancestry, he builds temples to himself, and he raises his children to believe they are living gods. In Alexandria, the city Alexander himself had founded, the air crackled with ambition. Marble libraries, bustling harbours, and opulent palaces made it the jewel of the Mediterranean. But beneath the gleaming surface, paranoia simmered. The royal family was an island of Greeks ruling millions of Egyptians, and they knew one truth: blood was everything. Foreign blood weakened power. Only royal blood was sacred enough to wear the double crown of Egypt. This belief would rot the dynasty from the inside. Arsinoe was born into this glittering cage. Her mother was Berenice I, Ptolemy's favoured queen, known for her sharp mind and even sharper survival instincts. Arsinoe was their daughter, bright and striking, with eyes like polished obsidian and the poise of someone raised to rule. From childhood she was taught the mythology of her house, that she was descended from gods, that her body was not her own but the property of the throne. Even as a child she lived among whispers. Servants bowed low, yet never met her gaze. Tutors lectured her not about love or happiness, but about strategy, lineage, and the duty to marry whomever the crown commanded. Love, they told her, was for peasants. Royalty must be cold as marble. But she was still human. She played with doves on the palace roof, painted her lips with crushed berries, and dreamed of sailing across the Aegean, far from the suffocating gaze of the court. She didn't know yet that the sea would one day carry her to thrones and graves. By the time Arsinoe was 13, she had already been promised like a piece of cargo. Her father, aging yet cunning, saw her not as a daughter but as a weapon. He feared the fragile unity of his empire. Rivals circled like sharks. He needed alliances, and in his world alliances were made through blood, literal blood, and so tea. The palace became a chessboard. Every banquet, every marriage, every whispered rumour could mean survival or death. The women of the dynasty were pawns, until they learned to become queens. Arsinoe watched and learned. She watched as her half-siblings were married off or mysteriously disappeared. She watched how her mother navigated the venomous court with a smile that hid a dagger. She understood that if she wanted to live, she would have to be more than beautiful. She would have to be terrifying. Still, nothing could prepare her for the night her father summoned her to his private chambers. The torches flickered low. The guards averted their eyes. And Ptolemy I, her father, told her the unthinkable. She was to be his bride. It was not unprecedented. Egyptian pharaohs had long married their sisters and daughters, cloaking incest in the language of divine union. To the court, it was not sin, it was sanctity. To Arsinoe, it was horror. That night marked the death of the girl she had been. In her place, a queen began to rise, but the cost of becoming divine was her humanity. And soon the world beyond Egypt would feel the chill of her crown. After Ptolemy I's death, Arsinoe was cast adrift in a world where kings devoured each other like wolves. But she did not fade. She sharpened herself. Her first political marriage was to Lysimachus, king of Thrace and Macedonia, a man old enough to be her grandfather, yet one of the last surviving generals of Alexander. He saw her as a prize, a living thread to Alexander's legacy. She saw him as a fortress. In Lysimachus's court, Arsinoe transformed from ornament to operator. She learned how to whisper rumors into weapons, how to bend hardened generals to her will. She bore him sons, solidifying her claim to his throne. but behind the gilded doors, her life became a tightrope. Rivals accused her of scheming, of poisoning, of witchcraft. She smiled and survived. When Lysimachus executed his own son Agathocles, her stepson, on charges of treason, many whispered that Arsinoe had orchestrated it to clear the path for her own children. Whether it was true didn't matter. The rumor alone made her feared, and in the game of kings, fear was better than love. But fate turned cruel. In 281 BCE, Lysimachus fell in battle against Seleucus I. Arsinoe's world collapsed overnight. Her husband was dead. Seleucus seized his lands. Arsinoe fled with her young sons, clutching them like lifelines as she sailed across the wine-dark sea. She landed back in Egypt, back in the jaws of the family she thought she had escaped. Waiting there was her brother, Ptolemy II, and the most dangerous decision of her life. Ptolemy II Philadelphus was brilliant, cultured, and cold. He had inherited their father's empire, but also his paranoia. Surrounded by foreign enemies and treacherous courtiers, he trusted no one. No one except, perhaps, the sister he remembered from childhood. Arsinoe saw her chance. She needed protection. He needed loyalty. Their bloodline demanded purity. And so, in a move that stunned even jaded Alexandrians, they married, brother and sister, king and queen. It was the moment her name was etched in infamy. The court erupted in scandal. Some whispered that it was sacred, a rebirth of the divine marriage of Isis and Osiris. Others whispered what you are thinking now, that it was monstrous. But Ptolemy wrapped the marriage in religion. Priests declared them Theoi Adelphoi, the sibling gods. Coins were minted with their twin faces. Every statue, every inscription screamed their union was divine, and anyone who opposed it simply vanished. To the public, they were gods. Behind closed doors, they were something else. Arsinoe became Ptolemy's equal, not his ornament. She co-signed decrees, ruled side by side, and crushed their enemies with precision. Together, they built libraries, funded scholars, and turned Alexandria into the intellectual capital of the world. But their throne was built on corpses. One of those corpses was her own half-brother, Ptolemy Keraunos. He had once tried to seize Egypt and failed, slinking off in humiliation. Arsinoe, never forgiving, lured him back with promises of peace, then betrayed him. He fled north and later died horribly, his head displayed by barbarian invaders. To the world, it was karma. To Arsinoe, it was unfinished business. Her ambition burned hotter than the desert sun, and it frightened Ptolemy II, because ambition has no loyalties. Soon, rumors spread that Arsinoe was plotting to place her own sons from her first marriage on Egypt's throne. Ptolemy could not allow that. In a series of secret moves, he had her children declared illegitimate and exiled. Arsinoe's screams echoed through the palace as guards dragged her sons away. That night, something inside her cracked. Once she had been a pawn, then a queen. Now she was becoming something else entirely, a ghost wearing a crown, hollowed by loss, driven only by vengeance and survival. To outsiders, the royal couple glittered like marble gods. Inside, their marriage had rotted into cold strategy. They no longer touched. They no longer spoke except in council. Their eyes slid past each other like knives. And still, the people worshipped them. But beneath the hymns and incense, the walls of Alexandria trembled, because when gods turn on each other, mortals bleed. What began as a union of power descended into silent war. Arsinoe and Ptolemy ruled together but lived like enemies bound by gold chains. Their court became a theatre of shadows. Banquets where every smile hid poison, processions where every step was watched. Arsinoe withdrew from public life, retreating to her own palace wing lined with black granite columns and guarded by Nubian mercenaries loyal only to her. She plotted, she listened, she waited, but every door she opened slammed shut. Ptolemy had stripped her of real authority, placing loyalists in every council seat, every treasury post. The woman who once orchestrated kingdoms was now a gilded prisoner. The losses hollowed her. She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. Servants found her pacing marble halls at night, muttering to herself in Greek and Egyptian, hands streaked with ink from the frantic letters she never sent. Her beauty, once a weapon, faded. She smeared her face with coal like war paint, but her eyes were dead coals. The girl who had dreamed of freedom was gone. Only the ghost of a queen remained, and then came the final cruelty. One by one, news arrived that her exiled sons had died. Accidents, the messengers said, shipwrecks, fevers, misfortune. But Arsinoe knew. She knew her brother husband had them quietly erased, wiping out her bloodline like chalk from a slate. When the last message came, she did not scream. She only smiled, a thin, cracked smile that chilled her attendants to the bone. Ptolemy expected her to break. Instead, she did something worse. She performed. She walked beside him in public ceremonies, her hand in his, her face carved in serene divinity. The people cheered, never guessing the truth. To them, the sibling gods were immortal. To Arsinoe, the mask was all that remained of her. Her mind began to blur at the edges. She spoke to statues. She heard her dead children in the wind. She started wandering the palace gardens at dawn, barefoot, leaving trails of blood where the gravel cut her feet. Priests called it holy madness. Ptolemy called it an embarrassment. And then, one day, she vanished from court entirely. No procession, no funeral, no body. Some said Ptolemy had her quietly poisoned and buried in secret. Others claimed she escaped across the sea, living out her days in obscurity. A few insisted she drowned herself, finally slipping beneath the waves that once carried her to glory. Hissed. Ori went silent. The marble goddess crumbled into rumor, but in the silence she left behind, the palace still trembled. Centuries later, Roman historians would call her divine, magnificent, fearless. They wrote of Arsinoe too as if she were a comet, blazing, unstoppable, touched by gods. They praised her beauty, her intellect, her political genius. They did not mention the screams. They did not write about the child forced to marry her father. They did not record the nights she wandered blood-footed through empty gardens. They erased the horror, gilding it with myth. But if you peel away the marble, you see the truth. You see a girl born into a world where her body was never hers, a daughter sacrificed for politics, a queen who learned to survive by becoming what she hated, a woman crowned in gold and buried in silence. Arsinoe's story is not just about Egypt. It is about every throne that demands blood to stay standing. It is about how power devours love, how dynasties eat their own children to survive. It is about what happens when human hearts are treated as tools, and what it costs to break free. Even in her ruin, Arsinoe left an echo. Her cult endured for centuries. Temples bore her name. Coins with her face circulated long after she was gone. The people worshipped her not as a victim but as a goddess, and maybe that was her final victory, to turn her pain into legend, to make the world bow before the ghost of the girl they destroyed. But legends are liars, and behind the gold mask she was only human, a human who was never allowed to be human. Subscribe for more, share this story, and tell me in the comments what shocked you most. Because somewhere, beneath the ruins of Alexandria, the wind still whispers her name, Arsinoe.